In every school, there are more and more children living in households that are under the grip of poverty. So whilst on the face of it, education is free, there are often hidden or extra costs that are acting as a barrier to participation. This film tells us a story about why facing up to child poverty in schools is important. It prompts us to raise awareness and to stimulate change by engaging children and young people, the whole school staff, parent councils, families and community planners. It also shares insight about tools and approaches to assess school costs and implement low-cost, low-resource solutions that will make a difference to children's lives.
Education is free, but a lot of school things are not.
The impact of the cost of school day on parents is staggering. It's a hidden cost. It can affect parents in many ways, from the cost of the uniform, from the cost of school trips, to not only it comes down to lunches, breakfasts and how PE kit. There's loads of wide variety how it's really important that we raise awareness of the impact of the cost of school day for parents.
So the project's been running at CPAG in Scotland since 2014 and it began in Glasgow, supported by health and education and various other partners. What the project is trying to achieve, it's trying to mitigate some of the effects of poverty for children and young people from low-income households. And it's trying to do that by working out where the problems might be, where the barriers might be financially for children and young people at school, and where the financial pressures might be for their families. Currently we're in the middle of a local authority-wide project up in Dundee, and we've helped a whole range of other local authorities think about what their approach might be to addressing the cost of the school day.
The Council and the Community Planning Partnership leads an awful lot of the strategic response to inequalities and to better outcomes for children in a place like Dundee. And the things that have guided us have been the Fairer Scotland action plan, and we were delighted that the Dundee Partnership's commitment to cost of the school day was actually featured as one of the pledges in the action plan.
15 schools have come on board. 11 primary schools, 2 secondaries and 2 early years settings as well. And what we've done as CPAG is gone into those settings and carried out focus groups with pupils, with staff and also with parents. And we've also spoken to parents at more informal settings like holiday provision and the school gates, as well as sent home surveys and did a bit more work with staff with surveys and things. So in local authorities who've really focused on this as an issue and taken a local authority-wide approach to looking at it, there are a few changes I can certainly think of. Things like increases in clothing grant levels to help with uniform affordability. In Glasgow, the automation of clothing grants so that families actually just get it automatically. There's not that problem with low uptake, which so many local authorities find. I know in some local authorities, curriculum charges, costs for accessing subjects have come up as a real barrier, obviously, to children from low-income families taking part. And so those local authorities have invested in removing those curriculum charges.
Children would be worried about affording basic things.
Our priority is trying to reduce inequality. So the gap in Dundee between children from the better off areas and from the poorer off areas is really significant, and there's not an awful lot of evidence that we've been closing that as quickly as we would like. So we wanted to demonstrate from an educational attainment perspective that we understood the main driver, and for us that's levels of poverty and levels of income in families. So we're never going to address educational attainment and then other poor outcomes for young people in Dundee if we don't do something about poverty. And poverty shows up in so many different ways in school, and we wanted to address that and be confident that we were doing something about it.
It's worked best where there's been a real buy-in at senior management level, and I think in quite a few schools a member of staff has kind of been given ownership of cost of the school day, so they've been our go-between in the school. They've really helped to organise the pupils to speak to us, but they've also been the person that's gone away and made sure that the whole school staffing team, from the janitor to the office to the head teacher, really knows what the pupils are saying, and that everybody's best placed to take anything forward to make a change.
Following on from the initial meeting, I was keen to get involvement from CPAG in the school. So first of all, I went back to the school and I met with the staff myself and said, I've just been to a meeting for the cost of the school day. This project is something that I'd like for us to be involved with, and explained again my own personal reasons for being involved with this, but also realising, that this is something that I think could really benefit our children and our families. So I invited a representative from CPAG along to meet and to talk with the staff, and which was again very beneficial because right away the staff were on board, and I think that was key. I think just we felt this makes sense.
There are countless examples of changes at school level that we've seen from schools that we've worked in and with, and some will sound small but actually can make a huge difference to children and young people. Things like cheaper uniform, breakfast clubs, homework clubs, support to access ICT resources, stigma-free systems by which children and young people can ask for support for going on trips, and greater understanding, I think, amongst teachers in terms of maybe why a young person doesn't have a calculator and a pencil, or why they might not be wearing the right uniform, or why they might be late. All of these things which can actually have cost implications, found greater awareness.
There's nothing to do at the summer fair if you don't have money. Even throwing a sponge at the teacher costs about £1. I would just go home.
There is the Cost of the School Day toolkit, which brings together a whole range of resources to help schools consult with their own staff, with children and young people in their school, and with families on the cost of the school day, identifying the barriers, finding out the solutions. There's so much good practice out there in terms of addressing school costs and child poverty in schools. These issues have kind of gained a lot of prominence and momentum in recent years, but they're issues that schools have been dealing with for forever. Child poverty has always been an issue in Scotland. So there's lots of practice out there that's really, really impactful, and I think what we need to do is be pulling that together and sharing it more widely, so that if a school is wondering what can we do to increase our free meal uptake, or what can we do to make our uniform policy more affordable, or how can we help with transport? There'll be a school out there who's done it and done it brilliantly, and so it's about being able to learn from that practice.
I think our vision's primarily been around supporting schools to understand some of the underlying issues that families face. The causes, the scale of child poverty, and through developing that understanding, we then wanted schools to explore how they could mitigate the impacts. We were never saying to schools, we're not saying to schools, you can solve all the problems, you can eradicate child poverty, but what we know through research is that schools can very much mitigate impact through the policies and practices that they implement.
So 1 in 5 is the Edinburgh Council sort of poverty proofing initiative. So it's obviously referring to the fact that 1 in 5 children in Edinburgh are living in poverty, and we've taken that framework and really undertaken a lot of work here at Tynecastle to try and mitigate against that.
In order to really stimulate change and to get staff to think about children's experiences and what schools can do to help support children, that training was essential, sort of putting the why behind, why might a child behave in the way that they do when they come into school. And there's a range of risk factors, and of course we know that one of the biggest risk factors is poverty.
We've trained up the whole school, we've done whole school training, we've done awareness raising with students, and the staff have really bought into the whole sort of ethos and framework, and have been really supportive of everything we've done. Right at the start, we did a series of assemblies with our students sort of raise the issue, to sort of let them know that we were concerned to make sure that everybody who attended Tynecastle was treated equally and treated fairly. So we did discuss the idea of poverty, we discussed some of the negative stereotypes around poverty and why people might feel uncomfortable discussing it as a topic. But our sort of message to them was that if you come to Tynecastle, it doesn't matter about your background, your circumstances, how much money you have, that you will have the same opportunities as everybody else, and if there's something that might make that difficult for you, that we will try and make sure that we help with that as much as possible.
First of all, we wanted to get our children's views. You know, that is so important because everything we do affects them, so it's essential that we need to get our children's opinions about the cost of the school day. So working together with CPAG, you know, we conducted you know, a series of, you know, workshops involving our children, you know, gauging their own experiences, getting their own views, and really establishing, you know, the things that the children were coming up with, that actually some things we hadn't actually considered. For example, you know, costs of like home learning, of trips, uniform, etc. These were all things that were brought up by the children, and from that we think, right, you know, children are, one thing that was very clear here is that our children are aware, you know, that there are financial hardships. So if our children are aware of that, you know, that's telling us something, we need to be doing something about this too.
I think this extra stuff, it puts the kids under pressure, but it also puts the parents under pressure if they can't afford it. It's all this pressure and embarrassment that's unnecessary.
One of the first things we asked all the schools to do was do an audit of all the school trips in order to see what they were actually charging families, and in the school where there was quite hidden poverty, so as I say only around about 10% of the children who were in child poverty, they discovered that actually throughout the course of the child's school time at that school, they were asking parents for £1,000 in school trips, and that was a primary school. So through doing the audit, it started to become evident on, you know, where the costs were around trips. So it was about looking at, okay, how can we reduce those costs?
It can be really embarrassing for parents because they don't want to admit that they can't afford to buy, especially as starts like we're coming up to the end of the school term. The new term's about to begin in August. That's the whole opportunity of having to go buy and purchase new uniform. That alone is a heavy weight in a lot of parents' minds. If you've got more than one child, school shoes aren't cheap.
One of the things that we have realised this year is that we need to be consistent in how we're communicating our message. We've had a really great buy-in from staff. Staff are really supportive of this and they've really been on board, and that's been great because, you know, that might not have been the case. Some people might have said, why are we doing this? We really haven't had that because people have understood that actually everything we're doing in the classroom is less effective if students are not, you know, safe and happy and well.
Get in there and train up the staff, get them aware of the issues, because unless if staff aren't aware of the issues or they've not got it in the front of their mind, I think it can easily get forgotten. You know, that the things that we do in schools, we can have great ideas that sound fabulous, but actually for some children are very, very problematic. So it's kind of getting that awareness of how it feels, emotionally engaging with the staff around how it can feel to be a child who's not getting to take part in things. And from there, I think you will find that staff really want to make a difference and they really want to take that challenge on and see what can be done.
We've already seen how small changes can have a big impact, and it's something, you know, that now that we all say, what about the cost? So it's saying, what about the cost of the school day? That is a question that we're continually asking ourselves here at Avenue End.
People stay off because they don't have the money. They think their outfit is silly, or they just wear their uniform.
There are so many conflicting priorities in schools, and there's all sorts of things coming out that are seen as the kind of popular thing to do. I suppose from my point of view, cost of the school day feeds into everything else. You know, if you're thinking about attainment and well-being, even maths and literacy, you know, cost of the school day really, you can't, if a child can't come to school because they are hungry or they don't have the right clothes, then they're not going to be able to learn. So I think schools and other local authorities across Scotland, if they can understand that actually small changes make a big difference, and it doesn't take numerous members of staff, it doesn't take thousands of pounds, the resource implications aren't actually massive. It's about sitting down as schools and thinking, well, what little changes can we make that would make a big difference to families?
So I suppose the changes that can be made at local authority level and or at school level, they are very specific to the setting and to the particular issues in them, but I think what they've got in common are they're focused on making sure that no child or young person misses out because of their family income. It's trying to remove or reduce opportunities for difference and income-related stigma, and it's trying to remove financial pressures from family budgets that are often massively stretched.
If you don't have breakfast, you're starving and you can't concentrate.
So one of the real highlights of Breakfast Club, I think, is just what a nice start it is to the day for everybody. And when we started it last year, we hoped that we'd maybe, get a dozen kids along, and that we might slowly grow. But actually, by the end of the first week, we had about 40 kids every day, which was amazing. And one of the nicest things about it is the number of staff that opted in. We didn't think, when we said to staff, do you want to come in 45 minutes early for nothing, maybe a cup of tea, that we would have lots of people volunteering to do that. But actually, we had a really, really great response. I think it's probably about a third of the staff who've helped at one time or another. And it's just such a positive start to the day. And in terms of building up relationships, it's one of my favourite parts of the day, because you're just having a nice chat. And if you're, making somebody a bit of toast, getting them to take a bit of fruit away with them, make sure they're set up for break time, it changes the dynamic of that relationship later on if you, have to have a word with them about something, maybe to do with their work or their behaviour that you're, needing to address. So that's been really, really positive for everybody. And I think it changes how children see us as, they see us as individuals first thing in the morning rather than as teachers.
Ultimately, as teachers, as educators, we all came into this profession to make a difference to children and children's lives. Our children, as we know, deserve the very best. We're here and we want children to have those opportunities that they can do whatever they want in the future. And we, working together with our children, with our staff, with our families, with everyone in our local community, because together we can achieve this. To me, the cost of the school day is something that we really need to have embedded in our practice.
Children in Dundee and schools in Dundee are an enormous part of our life in the city, and we want to use the cost of the school day to improve the outcomes for everybody in Dundee.